Welcome everyone. This is Guy Gambit, the social tactician. If we took 100 random men and asked them, hey guys, how would you rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10? 100% of those men would have some answer. Even if they don't want to share it with you, in their mind, there's some number that they came up with. But if you ask those same 100 men, hey guys, can you tell me the actual variables that you're using to determine your sexual market value, your numerical rating on a scale from 1 to 10? I venture to guess that you would get lots of blank stares, and maybe 10% of them could give some kind of coherent answer. I know what you're thinking. Why is it even important for me to know the exact variables that make up my sexual market value? Why can't I just wing it like 99% of the other guys out there? This is a lesson I had to learn the hard way. In high school, I played basketball, but I wasn't a starter. I was one of those guys who rode the pine, as they say. I would ride the bench, and in the last 30 seconds of the game, I might get in and try and get a stat by fouling someone or a rebound. I made the team my freshman year, my sophomore year, and then my junior year, I made the varsity team. Even though I was one of the worst guys on the team, this made me a big man on campus, a BMOC. And I heard through a friend that there's a cheerleader that really has a crush on me. In the weeks after I made the team, I was very busy with basketball stuff. And so I didn't really have too much time to interact with the cheerleader. I would just kind of wave at her and say hi in passing in the hallway. And I could tell by her smile and eye contact, she really was into me. Later, I started thinking about my grades are atrocious. I'm like a C student at best. And now it's my junior year. I'm getting ready to apply for college. I have to work on my GPA and academics, and being on the basketball team just isn't going to allow that. So I walked into the coach's office and I quit. About 3 days later, I saw that same cheerleader in the hallway, and I confidently strode up to her and said, hey, would you like to go grab a cheeseburger and a milkshake this weekend? She looked at me right in the face, and I'll never forget what she said. Oh my God, you can't be serious. Why did you quit the basketball team? And that's when I realized we were coming from two entirely different perspectives. I thought she likes me for some quality that's just unchanging. She either likes me or she doesn't. What I didn't realize is there's a complex algorithm going on in her mind that assesses my sexual market value at that time. And by quitting the basketball team, I had destroyed my social status variable and lowered my SMV, so she no longer found me as attractive. This was a hard lesson. Since we keep throwing around the term sexual market value, let's make sure we're on the same sheet of music as to what it actually is. This is your 1 to 10 rating on your level of desirability and attractiveness to one woman. Importantly, your SMV is not a composite score. It is taking place on one specific woman. Your sexual market value score, your level of attractiveness rated 1 through 10, isn't a moral judgment. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily good because you're attractive or bad because you have a low rating. It in no way implies any moral judgment. It's simply your level of desirability or attractiveness to the woman that's looking at you. Since it's purely woman-driven, men can't rate other men. This is because it's a mental algorithm that's taking place in her brain and for that one specific woman. Therefore, it's very subjective and individualistic, meaning if 5 different women all look at and interact with the same man, and then you say, how would you rate him? You're going to get a different answer for each woman. But ultimately, any woman anywhere on planet Earth is considering 11 variables to determine your sexual market value. Of the 11, you as the man brings 6 variables to the table, and the woman brings the other 5 for a total of 11 variables. Under your variables, I have the typical looks, money, status, and game variables, and we've added pre-selection and physical behaviors. For the woman, We have other women's approval that I've depicted in blue because we'll talk about how it's linked to pre-selection. And then two biological or evolutionary factors, her age, ovulatory cycle I've added. And then here down at the bottom, we've added unique things to that specific girl. Each of these we're going to talk about in turn. Let's do yours first. The first and perhaps most powerful variable is pre-selection. Quite simply, pre-selection is the fact that the SMV rating of the women that you're seen in public with will affect your SMV rating, moving it either higher or lower. An example of this is if I walk into a bar with two 10s on my arm and they're smiling and having fun, everyone will assume I must be a 9 or a 10. Similarly, if I walk into the same bar with a 3, the women who are rating my SMV will move it lower. This is primarily because women always seek other women's approval. If you're pre-selected by beautiful women, then obviously those women approve of you. So there's a linkage between the two variables. The second variable are your looks. Here I'm not talking about just what she sees. It's not just your height, your weight, your age, your ethnicity. It also includes everything of how she experiences you through her 5 senses. This is why your vocal tone is important. The way that you smell is important. When you touch her, does it feel good? Think in terms of her whole sensory experience. When I mention wealth, I'm not talking about the money in your bank account necessarily. It needs to be displayed. If she can't experience or see your wealth, then it's irrelevant in the calculation. So you want to think in terms of wearing a nice watch, being dressed very nice, gaining access to clubs that require wealth or are difficult to get into, having a VIP table, anything that's a displayed sign of wealth. Fourth is your status. It can be local, specifically to a venue, or it can be general in terms of fame or celebrity. I recommend focusing on achieving local status, as this is the easiest to attain and it still greatly affects the SMV calculation of the women within that venue. One example is a dishwasher who works a very low-end job and is not particularly good looking in terms of looks. That same dishwasher, if he goes to the local pub and he's the lead guitarist in the band, the women within that pub will rate him very high on SMV. Next we have behaviors. If you go to YouTube and look up Vox Day, he created a social sexual hierarchy of rating men alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and omega being at the bottom. Here he's talking in terms of male archetypes, but I'm suggesting you need to think in terms of which behavior each archetype would have. An example of this, if someone is acting alpha in a club, they're going to be talking with their hands, they'll be smiling, they'll be confidently leading the group. Similarly, an omega just wouldn't even want to go out, whereas a delta might be in the club, but isn't really talking to anyone, is just kind of looking down, holding their beer. So the behaviors you display that would be in line with that male archetype are the fifth variable. And the sixth variable is your game or Rizz. This, in my opinion, is the most important of your variables because only game or Rizz affects your SMV calculation in the mind of the woman, and once you've attracted and attained her, it also affects things after, and that now you learned techniques and an ideology on how to manage the relationship. Only game or Rizz will do that. We talked about your variables. Now what about hers? Her first and possibly most powerful variable is other women's approval. As discussed, this is intimately linked to your variable pre-selection, but it's more than that. It's any time she solicits the advice or input from other women, her friends and peers. It could be quite simply, hey, look at this guy's photo. Is he hot? If you've never interacted with those women before, then you're not influencing their input. But if she asks women who happen to be in your social circle or who you've previously interacted with, then this is one of the variables that you can affect. Next is her biological age, and not just that, but her life phase. If you go on YouTube and look up Rollo Tomasi, he has an in-depth presentation where he breaks down a woman's life phase from her party years through an epiphany phase, all the way through to like a security seeking phase. And in each phase, she's looking for a different type of man. So her biological age and her life phase is variable 8. Believe it or not, variable 9 is her ovulatory cycle shift. Again, Rollo Tomasi has a very in-depth presentation on this, but to suffice it to say, the important part is, if ovulation occurs at day 14 in her cycle, before ovulation, as her estrogen levels are increasing, she seeks a more alpha type of guy. After ovulation, she's seeking a more comfort-building guy, like a beta type of person. Okay, we've talked about her biological variables. Now let's talk about something that many people overlook, her cultural conditioning. Obviously, a girl who's raised in Somalia versus a girl who's raised in Sweden versus a girl who's raised in Colombia have very different outlooks on what makes a man attractive. So this is a very important variable that many people overlook. And the final variable are her personal preferences. Over time, a girl comes to like certain type of men over others and value other things. It can be 1,000 different items, but her personal preferences are also very important. Of all these 5 variables, the only one that you really can affect are other women's approval. But there's a trick. You can go to a venue that will select a woman who's going to have these variables in your favor. What I'm talking about here is if I'm looking for a 25-year-old beautiful Colombian woman who loves to salsa dance, if I look for her at a Walmart in Davenport, Iowa, I could look for 100 years and she'll just never be there. But if I go down to Medellin, Colombia, and I go into a salsa club, it's absolutely full of that type of woman. So when it comes to a woman's variables, amateurs accept them and the pros select them. So, what should you take away from our discussion today? Understand your SMV is specific to one girl. One girl is calculating your SMV, but she's going to greatly value the opinion of other women. Or, as Sci-Hack has said, women want what other women want. Another takeaway is pre-selection is your cheat code. It's the easiest and most effective way to boost your SMV, but too many guys overlook it. For all the variables, you want to work on yours and then select a venue or the place that's likely to select for that type of girl. In that way, you can influence both your variables and hers. Finally, I urge you to integrate these SMV variables and your knowledge of them into all your life decisions. Then you'll start thinking like a social tactician. This has been Guy Gambit. Now get out there and be social.